Yesterday, we took a little trip down memory lane and revisited some of Fortnite's biggest nerfs of all time. Those weapons that just went from hero to absolute zero overnight. And today is going to be a part 2 to that video, so if you didn't go see part 1, be sure to go check that one out, and then of course come back to this video. Thank you to everybody who left comments on both my post and my video yesterday suggesting items for part 2. If you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to leave it a like and use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop if you would like to support my YouTube channel. With all that being said, let's get right into this one. So right away, we got to talk about medallions because honestly, this one just went right over my head and I didn't think about it, but you guys left a bunch of comments about medallions and now that I look back on them, you're absolutely right. And I guess this is really just specifically honing in on the medallions from Chapter 5 Season 1. Now, of course, the medallions give you like special abilities, right? But back then, all you got was just the additional healing, that's it, and that would stack for every extra medallion that you got. And the problem really stems from the fact that in Chapter 5 Season 1, when medallions launched, they were absolutely broken. It was basically impossible to win a game when you were going against somebody with the medallion. If you didn't have any medallions and you went against somebody that did, you were basically going to lose every single time, especially if they had multiple 2, 3, 4 medallions at a time. Good luck. You were honestly just never going to beat them. It was that serious. Honestly, it got to the point where I stopped playing Chapter 5 Season 1 because of the medallions and also other things like the Frenzy Auto Shotgun, of course, but actually mainly the medallions. And I think a lot of other people felt the same way. So what did? They absolutely nerfed these things into the ground. First, they added a shield cap for each medallion. So before this, there was no shield cap. You could regen as much shield as possible. They then lowered the circle radius by 60%, meaning it was more accurate and basically that the circle was more representative of actually where you were instead of being a larger radius. Basically, there was just a smaller circle on your body so people knew where you were better. They then decided to make it so that shield regeneration now stops for 3 seconds after damage. Before, it was basically as the second you took damage, you would start regenning. And the final nail in the coffin, really, they just reduced the shield regeneration. So you just regened less shield per medallion. I mean, after all these nerfs, I'll be honest with you, the Chapter 5 Season 1 medallions basically like became useless. Did they overstep it here? I don't know. That's up for you guys to talk about in the comment section. But this was a nerf that needed to happen regardless of how you feel about medallions. Basically, it went from you absolutely needed a medallion to win a game to it was just not really necessary to have a medallion, but if you saw one, you would just take it because why not? But honestly, for me, once I had 1 or 2 medallions, it didn't even matter. Like, it wasn't good at all. And honestly, a lot of people would actually just drop the medallions because the trade-off of being revealed on the map wasn't good enough for how much shield you were getting in return for having the medallion. Next, let's talk about the tactical SMG. Because wow, this weapon went from very quickly being one of my favorite weapons in the entire game to being one of the worst and my least favorite. And I guess it's really not even nerf, it's more like a rework. But I considered it a nerf because I genuinely feel like after these group changes in Chapter 2 Season 4, it became a worse weapon, actually a much worse weapon, one of the worst SMGs now in my opinion. So let's get into the numbers. Here is what they did. They reduced the fire rate from 13 to 9. That is the big one, right? 13 is an incredible fire rate, one of the fastest firing weapons in the game's history. But 9, not so much. You guys know how the TAC SMG plays. It shoots really slow now. They also reduced the magazine size from 35 to 25, which I guess makes sense, right? You're going to lower the fire rate, so you're going to lower the magazine. It doesn't need 35 bullets in a clip anymore. Still a pretty sizable nerf nonetheless. Also, like totally unrelated, but why did they ever change the sound of this thing? The original sound of the TAC SMG was so good. That thing was like a meat shredder. Now it is awful. I don't think I really have to explain anymore. I mean, the entire community knows they basically killed the TAC SMG. They nerfed it into oblivion. It really sucks, but I mean, when you see a weapon go from being one of the best SMGs in the game to one of the worst, it has to be on this list, absolutely. All right, this one is a little bit confusing, so let's talk about it. It's the Scar. And I'm not referring to the nerf that basically killed every single assault rifle early in Chapter 1 when they added damage fall off and they reduced the headshot multiplier, right? Because the Scar used to do like, I think 98 on a headshot. Of course, they nerfed that. Now it does 72. I'm not talking about that because that applies to every single assault rifle, not just the Scar. What I'm really more so referring to here is actually the Chapter 4 Scar. Guys, this thing is atrocious. It's honestly like insulting to still call it a Scar because it is nowhere near as good as the one from the original chapters of Fortnite was. And it really has nothing to do with the damage, right? Because they had to adjust the damage due to the adjusting rarities, right? They made it a common and green weapon, right? Not just an exclusive purple and legendary weapon. So of course the damage numbers are going to be a little bit lower. In my opinion, it had everything to do with the accuracy of the weapon. The Scar went from being that pinpoint high powering weapon to being a totally inaccurate mess. The bloom was absolutely disastrous. I'm going to try and find post-nerf gameplay, this thing looks awful. If you even tried to move like a little bit while you were aiming, your bullets were just gonna go everywhere. Guys, I can't explain to you how big of a nerf this was. I mean, I just thought I had bad aim, but then just like a lot of people, I started using the red eye, and it was so much better than the Scar in Chapter 4, Season 1. Again, this is another weapon that went from being at the tip top of its class to being absolutely god-awful. They should have never even made it in the common through blue rarities. It should have just stayed in those higher rarities, but they did it, and it was a bad decision. All right, I want to throw a really quick one in here. That's the Deagle, and guys, it's going to be really quick because there's not really much to talk about. I guess this isn't so much of an example of a weapon being nerfed, but a weapon just being so blatantly overpowered that it had to get changed back to what it was before. And what was that change, you might ask? Well, the structure damage was increased from 79 in the purple variant and 83 in the legendary variant to 150 and 157 respectively. And if you know anything about the HP of walls in Fortnite, 150 is enough to one-shot a wooden wall. So it essentially became like a pocket-heavy sniper. Everybody was running around with a Deagle in their pocket. You'd have a pump, just Deagle straight into their box, use the pump, and there you go, just one pump them. But of course, this didn't last for long. They totally nerfed the structure damage back down to 100 and 105, so it could no longer one-shot wood builds. While this is a very sizable nerf, just looking at it for face value, I think it's more so the fact that the buff they gave to it was way too strong and they had to bring it back down to earth. All right, let's talk about the drum gun. This is going to be a good one because this weapon has so much history in Fortnite. If you ask anybody from like the early seasons of Chapter 1, they will have absolute PTSD talking about the drum gun because this thing at one point was the best weapon in the game. There was a point in time when this weapon, the Legacy drum gun, was doing 27 damage with a DPS of 243. Do you know how absurd that is? We were just talking about an SMG, the tac sub. I think the DPS of a legendary tac sub was like 180, right? This is 243. In, let me remind you, a purple rare variant, this thing was everywhere. It just had unbelievable structure damage and unbelievable fire rate. This thing was just ripping through builds. You had a huge magazine. I can't explain it to you. Hopefully the gameplay shows it for itself. It was just unreal. And this thing had an absolute plethora of nerfs. So let's go through it real quick. In Season 5, they reduced the fall off damage range from 80% to all the way down to 55%. So at those longer ranges, this thing was going to be basically useless, as it should have been from the start. This is a SMG kind of AR technical hybrid. This thing was never supposed to be used at long range. They then decreased jumping accuracy by 5%. They decreased targeting accuracy by 10%. And then the spawn rate was reduced by 40% because the problem was everyone had their hands on it. It was spawning everywhere. And the real big boy nerf, the damage was reduced all the way down from 26 and 27 to 21 and 22. That is a massive nerf. So not only did they just wreck the accuracy on this thing, they also just nuked the damage as well. So yeah, they basically just destroyed everything that this weapon was good at. It went from being an incredible, I mean, I was going to say borderline overpowered. It was absolutely overpowered to now a below average SMG in my opinion. When it came back in Chapter 5, I was not a big fan of it, mainly because of its accuracy. It's incredibly inaccurate. Or maybe that's how it should have been from the start. Maybe it was just way too strong when it launched and it was way too accurate for what it was. I'll let you guys decide that in the comment section below. And here's one that I guarantee you guys did not see coming. That's actually the Boogie Bomb. And that's mainly because the Boogie Bomb is still really good. It's extremely useful. It has its uses. It's very versatile, but if you can imagine, it used to be twice as strong. And you may not have even known that some of these changes existed because they happened a long time ago. They were in the very, very early seasons of Chapter 1. I'm talking like seasons 2, 3, 4 times. So the first actual nerf here was that they changed the rarity from uncommon to rare. If you guys didn't know, which I wouldn't expect anybody to really know, is the Boogie Bomb actually launched in a green rarity. And that didn't last too long, right? Just simply because they were too common, too easy to find. So they changed the rarity to how it is now, a rare rarity. But here is the absolute massive nerf. They decreased the duration of the Boogie Bomb from 10 seconds to 5. So they literally cut it in half. It got much, much worse, but it doesn't end there. The third major nerf to the Boogie Bomb was that the player would stop dancing when attacked. And you guys might be saying, what? Well, like that's totally normal now. You shoot somebody, they stop dancing. Well, that wasn't always the case. When the Boogie Bomb first launched, they would dance for 10 seconds, which let me just tell you is an absolute eternity after watching some of these clips. And what made it feel even longer is that the player would not stop dancing when they got attacked, right? So you would throw Boogie Bomb at somebody, you could shoot a pump shot, right, for 150 damage. They would have to keep dancing for 8 more seconds. That is honestly insane, and a lot of people don't think about this when it comes to the biggest nerfs because the Boogie Bomb is still good, it's still very useful. Some might even consider it too strong still. But if you think it's still too strong now, well, you should have seen it back then. If this thing was in the game how it was back then, in the current state of the game, yeah, I mean, it would absolutely start a rampage. Boogie Bomb absolutely deserves to be on this list. Next, let's talk about an absolute fall from grace. That's the Stinger SMG from Chapter 3. And I mean, take a shot if you've heard me say this before in this video. This weapon used to be top of its class. When this weapon launched and was in its peak, it was, I would say, probably a top 3 SMG of all time, but you easily could have made the argument that it was the best. And basically, it launched in a state where the damage was 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 24 in those respective rarities, right? From common to legendary. They then decreased the damage by 2, right? So just all those numbers I said, subtract 2. That is a big nerf, taking away 2 damage from an SMG. The reason why minus 2 damage is such a sizable nerf for an SMG is because of the amount of bullets it takes to kill somebody, right? So with the original Stinger on launch, from rare and above, you were a 5-bullet kill. So, right, it was 20 damage and up. So 5 bullets, you could kill somebody in just white health. But by decreasing it in 2 in every rarity, it meant that you could only 5-bullet kill somebody in epic or legendary rarities. So now you were mostly going to have a 6-bullet kill, and that extra bullet to kill slows down the time to kill, it lowers the DPS, all that stuff. But that wasn't the only nerf this thing received. They then cut the damage by 1 again. So all the numbers that I just said subtract by 1, and that meant so that you could only 5-bullet kill in the legendary rarity. Everything else was going to be a 6 or 7-bullet kill. They also reduced the damage to structures by 5, and that was one of the main talking points about this weapon, besides the fact that it did a ton of damage, was that it would just rip through builds. And while reducing the damage to structures by 5 may not sound like a big nerf, it actually is, because think about an SMG, think about how fast you could shoot 10 bullets, right? That is minus 50 structure damage that you would have already done. That's a third of a wooden wall, right? Good math right there, guys, good math. But yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. And it doesn't say anything in the Fortnite wiki, especially about accuracy, but I feel like the recoil on this thing just got to a point where it was absolutely insane. And the fact that they nerfed the damage, and then the fact that you had trouble hitting a shot, well, there you go. That's not a good combo. I was originally going to put the Stinger in part 1 because when I thought about big nerfs, this was the first weapon that came in my head, but it didn't make it a part 1, so here it is in part 2 because I know a lot of people were asking about it. And of course, I had to save the best for last. If you clicked on this video, you saw it in the thumbnail. That's the pump shotgun, and this one is so nuanced and so confusing, it's honestly even hard for me to talk about it. The pump shotgun has changed so much. There is literally like over 3 pages on the Fortnite wiki of just buffs, nerfs, changes to this weapon. I can't read them all. And while the pump shotgun did get nerfed into oblivion, it is still one of the best shotguns of all time, in my opinion, a top 3 shotgun easily, which actually just goes to show how strong it really was when it was in the game in the early seasons of Fortnite especially. And you guys all really know what I'm talking about. I don't have to go into like specific damage numbers. If you watch any gameplay of Fortnite from Chapter 1 Season 1 to like Chapter 1 Season 4 or 5 that time, the pump shotgun was hitting for like 230 damage from like SMG distance. It was insane. I will absolutely be putting up gameplay of this as well, and it's just insane to think about how strong this was. I'm not even talking about the fact that it was a literal sniper back in the day. You could hit for like 60, 70 damage from 100+ meters away with a pump shotgun. Also, I didn't really want to mention it, but I guess I kind of have to because you can't talk about the pump shotgun without mentioning double pump. While this is a mechanic and not really directly part of the weapon, it is something that made the pump shotgun definitely stronger. And so taking away double pump and adding the kind of swap delay was, I guess, a direct nerf to the pump shotgun. As I said earlier, the pump shotgun is still really good. It is one of the best shotguns of all time, but it used to be, no question, the absolute best weapon in the entire game's history. I mean, this weapon basically ran the entire game for half a chapter, even more than that, especially when they added the spaz shotgun in. I don't know, look, I'm not going to go into details with numbers here because there is just so much I can't cover it all, but you guys know exactly what I'm referring to. The pump shotgun is nowhere near how strong it used to be in those early seasons, Season 1, Season 2 especially. Alright, well, I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 to this kind of revisiting some of Fortnite's biggest nerfs. It was really fun to put together these 2 videos, and if you haven't seen part 1, I would absolutely recommend you go do that because there are some weapons you definitely forgot about in there that got absolutely nerfed into oblivion. Comment some other video ideas that you'd be interested in seeing in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it a like. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.